Streaming workers. One was working.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Pink and Towers on what has been a nice, quiet Friday in the life of Norwich City. Nothing major going on whatsoever. I jest, of course. It's been a very busy morning. We are going to hit the road very shortly because there is a football match this weekend, believe it or not. Norwich City in action, travelling to Blackburn Rovers. We will, of course, speak about that game, hopefully at some point, as well, of course, taking your questions, your comments on everything that has unfolded this week. Connor Southwell, Paddy Davitt. Well, I'm going to flash this up immediately from Tom, which is, afternoon, lads, deep breaths everywhere. It's not really felt like we've been able to take a deep breath at any point this week, Pad. Well, certainly the latter end of it.
No, I'm still getting over Wednesday night. So I don't even know what day it was. Wednesday night, yeah, that was the trigger. And concluding today was at 10 o'clock. With formerly of the parish, previous Derby Day match winner for green and yellow, appearing in a blue kit. I did talk up the optics, didn't I? I said on the live we did that would be the moment, I think, when this would really play out. And just said to you there in our canteen, on personal allegiance isn't to Norwich. Everybody probably knows that by now, but even me watching that man touching that Ipswich badge was winding me up. And if I'm anything to do with a green and yellow persuasion, then I can understand that really does bring home what a monumental few days it is in terms of the East Anglian divide. And as we reported on Wednesday night, that has now come to pass. Marcelino Nunez is an Ipswich Town player, and let's see how we go from here, because the reaction in the intervening period has been, well, probably underlines the depth of feeling / enmity between the two sets of supporters. I'm going to bowl this back to you at the start here, Connor, because you were in the privileged position last night, the Canaries Trust Q&A with Liam Manning, which you compared. So for anybody who maybe wasn't in the room it was at Carrow Road, wasn't it? Yeah,
It was, yeah.
Maybe starting off today's broadcast, inevitably Liam Manning, first public utterance on the situation. Give us a sense of where his head was at, what he said, how it's been justified internally.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And firstly, thank you to the Canaries Trust for putting on the event and for asking me to host it. Hopefully, it was a night for everyone that attended that was good value. Yeah, it was interesting. We started with that. Where else could we start after obviously the 24 hours that had preceded it? And it was interesting. I think he spoke around the fact that since he's walked in the door, he was very aware, or made very aware very quickly, that in Marcelino Nunez, he had a player who probably wanted to explore a move elsewhere. There was an interesting bit, actually, that there was an element of surprise that, forget Park Ipswich Town for a moment, the fact it was a championship move, because they were of the opinion that Marcelino Nunez felt that he'd kind of done the championship, he'd done his hard yards there, and it was now about the next step, be it into the Premier League, which is, I think, ideally where he would have liked to have gone, or to a league abroad. So I think there was an element of surprise around that. Then clearly, and he spoke about this, as soon as it was Ipswich Town, it became about Ipswich Town. It was about getting a fee that almost reflected the magnitude of that. And I think, as we discussed on Wednesday night, and I think as fans have discussed a lot, it's about whether you feel they have or haven't done that. And I think, as you say, Pad, and this is a good statement from Don Spencer, really, which probably kicks things off a little bit more, which is, and he says, can I kick things off with a statement? Ipswich Town by Norwich City's best players. This is now inescapably and factually true. Ben Knapper has rubber stamped that we are the junior partner, which again is a view that is being held. I mean, Paddy, this is the first time we've heard from Ben Knapper, and it's worth adding as well that Liam Manning spoke about alignment on this. He felt
Craig's been on the source, but thank you, Craig.
He felt that they did have alignment in terms of Ben Knapper, his decision as well. I put to him about the creativity in the midfield. He feels they have enough of that in his view. Went on to speak about Kenny McLean and Pella Matson as well, who's a player clearly they've been tracking for a long period of time. So yeah, those I guess were maybe the main takeaways, the main justifications, and clearly, as we've said from the outset, Pat, it's about the deal itself, which moves it on to that point that Dom has raised around Ben Knapper. We've heard from him now. Maybe you could read out the 3 parts of quotes in full for maybe people that haven't seen or read them yet.
Yeah, I mean, these are Ben Knapper's quotes on the club's official statement confirming Nunez's departure earlier today, and I think it is important that we've got the full context because these are the only public utterances so far we've had from Ben Knapper, who ultimately has driven this decision. It would have been his call to drive it through, whether it's in dialogue or in agreement with Manning or even higher up the food chain. And to quote Ben Knapper, it goes without saying this is a significant transfer for all parties involved. We absolutely understand the feeling and sentiment from our supporters at this time. And this was, of course, an extremely difficult decision for us to take. As with every transfer, many factors that we must consider, including the wishes of the player, their contractual position, team performance, and, of course, the offer itself. Ultimately, when considering all of those aspects, we firmly believe this is in the best interests of our club. We are committed to making what we feel are the best possible decisions for the football club, assessing all the factors in the round, both the short, medium, and long term. Of the possible scenarios and outcomes that this situation presented, we believe this is the one that leaves the club in the best position.
Your thoughts on those words?
Well, I mean, they were well advised to get very high up in those 3 parts. The impact on the fan base, because that is at the moment feels like far bigger, massive, exponentially bigger than banking 7.5 guaranteed, maybe rising to 10 million. It's how your fan base are feeling now. What it says in terms of the scale of ambition, what it says in terms of vis-a-vis the chances of maybe keeping pace with Ipswich this season, and how important that is in terms of internally or locally to this part of the world. So the fact that they've referenced that, I mean, you'd say, well, it'd have been amazing not to mention what the impact is on the fans, but the fact it was high up, I think, isn't a coincidence. I think that is deliberate. And then for me, he's almost trying to nudge the dial into this decision isn't in the here and now. It's been made with the short, medium, longer term, and taking on board the fact that, and you touched on what Liam Manning had to say, Marcelino Nunez did not want to be here. He did not want to be a Norwich player anymore. He's now in the final 12 months of his current contract. His head was elsewhere. His willingness to leave this club evident. We know there were contract talks last season. There was contract talks again this summer. Nunez's can't rebuff those. So, Ipswich were the only show in town. That's obviously then when we turbocharge this and it becomes something completely different. But at heart was a player there who didn't want to be there, and they've driven, in terms of the finances around it, indisputably that's good business. But nobody's thinking about that. As we said earlier in the week, I support a football club. I don't support a balance sheet or a business making money. And that very much is where a fan, rightly, will come from it. I've seen more nuance in the last few days amongst some Norwich fans, if I'm honest, that, in terms of the finances element of it, you can't just dismiss that, particularly when it's wrapped around a player who didn't want to be here. That's evident. But, I mean, we touched on it. Those quotes, somebody harshly or otherwise has suggested it might have been something that could have been produced by ChatGPT. So I think those 3 parts of its own aren't going to win over many of the disaffected fans who are still feeling quite raw. And for me, it's not just, choose my words carefully, it's maybe not the ones who, maybe filter a lot of their opinions through what they see on social media. For me, there's a lot of...
Sorry to interject, but can I just come back on this point from Deborah? Because this is a point I put to Liam Manning last night, because I get that it's a feeling that many Norwich fans have. Well, why couldn't you have said no and pushed him into the 23s? And I put that point to him, and the answer is simply they're not allowed to. There are rules, there are provisions put in place by the PFA and different elements that prevent them from doing so. So essentially, if you're a senior player, you have to have certain provisions in place. And then clearly it becomes about him having to be, if not in and around the group, then still close enough where that could have an impact. And I think we've seen maybe how Newcastle, for example, on a very, very big level have struggled with the Alexander Isak thing. So that, in essence, wasn't an option. I think he said, he didn't give the exact example, but I think there'd been an incident at a former club where he tried to do exactly that with a certain player and was informed he couldn't. So that was not a route if Liam Manning if what he said is correct. And clearly we're not privy. We'd have to go and dig into a load of rule books, and we haven't had the chance to do that in the last 48 hours. So hopefully that answers that point. Sorry, Paddy, just to cut.
No, I mean, I was just going to finish that. again, as I think we touched on towards the end of the broadcast midweek, this is done now. This is almost the first phase in this drama. I mean, it feels like all-encompassing and all-consuming, but it's the what next for me. I was walking into the office today, and it feels, in terms of an analogy, it's like Ashton is playing Knapper at poker, and all the chips are gone on the table, and the cards will get turned at some point, probably towards the end of the season, and we'll see who's got the hand. Because hypothetically, Marcelino Nunez goes to Ipswich, is an integral part of that team getting back to the Premier League at the first attempt. 7.5 rising to 10 is chicken feed, and that's the financial element. What it is in terms of the feeling around your fan base. You can't put a price on for me. So if there's another scenario there that he goes there and maybe he's in and out of the team, maybe the injury issues he's had at Norwich are still persisting, and Norwich keep pace, which I think is an important factor here. It's also about manning getting this group of players and this football club going. And if they do that, and Norwich are keeping pace with Ipswich, then it won't take away the feeling for many fans at the moment about betrayal and how could they, whether it's the player or whether it's the football club. But I think it will take the edge off it. And then, obviously, it will come the fact that they've had banked money that he probably hasn't represented in terms of good value for Ipswich. So that's where we're at for me. It's who's right, who's wrong. And I know in the here and now, there's very few people who would say that Ben Knapper has made the right call here. But, let's see how this plays out from here. And so much of this will be dictated for me by what does Manning do with that group of players? Can he get his group of players, Pella, Matson now, the latest one added to it? Can he get them going? And then we'll see. We'll see, the two different trajectories of both these football clubs. But in the here and now, there's absolutely no doubt about it. PR terms, it's a disaster for Norwich, and Ipswich are cock a hoop. And you can see that very clearly in their reveal video. Ashton shaking hands with Nunez, as we said on the
Danny Haynes as well.
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't follow Ipswich's signings this summer that closely. But I'd be surprised if Mark Ashton has got himself in front of the camera for any of their other business. So that it is what it is, and Norwich have to suck that up in terms of their fan base, and it's painful. And if that wasn't a big enough game, October 5, that could be quite easily, probably now, the biggest derby since the playoffs of 2015. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Here's a completely hypothetical one that I've thought about in recent days, but it's kind of the precedent that this sets now. Let's say, if not between now and December, let's paint a hypothetical picture here in January where hopefully, and I think we're now increasingly confident that Josh Sargent will be an Norwich player come the end of the window. But let's go to January and let's say, Ipswich Town need a striker and they put 35 million on the table for Norwich City. Do they entertain that because the money's there? Because that's the precedent now they've sent, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we're not Ben Knapper, so we won't talk for Ben Knapper. He countenanced this deal, so you can't definitively say it wouldn't happen, and that's a complete parallel universe that could happen. But surely the Atanasios would put the brake on that, just because of the optics. I mean, and again, for me, it's what happens between now and January. Where are the respective clubs? How are the seasons for both teams and clubs unfolding? Safe to say, if this decision now isn't offset by Manning getting Norwich going and they're not in and around the stated aim, which is to be in and around the top 6 come January, then this isn't going away. This will grow and this will grow and this will grow. And Ben Knapper surely knows that because he's a very sharp individual. We know that. We've had enough dealings with him. So he must have role-played this out and knows. I mean, if Torup, the axing of, was a big call, pales into insignificance with what he has sanctioned here in the last few days. So, he'll live or die by, in a footballing sense, by this decision particularly, because now he really is putting a lot of onus on his man, Liam Manning, and his coaching staff and the business they've done inward to get this club up and actually competing where in a part of the table you would expect Ipswich to be.
Indeed, we will move on from this in a minute because we've already done a big hour and 15 video on this earlier in the week, which obviously is available to go and watch. I would just like to. I think there was a comment about. Here we go from Finley about Onel Hernandez's video. He's released. I've seen it. You haven't. So I admit I'm asking you about something you've not seen as of yet. But in terms of, again, the fact that he's felt compelled, I guess, to put out a 30-minute YouTube video, which is very impassioned. I don't think anyone can argue with that, but also quite strong in terms of his thoughts on the club sanction it, on Nunez himself. Clearly, those two have had a very close friendship, and he says that's something now that he's having to reconsider, as well as kind of the business impact of it. The fact that a player who was here last season has felt compelled to do that, I guess, probably underscores all of this, which is the strength of feeling that is still there.
Yeah, well, as I say, I haven't watched it, so probably bowl this one back to you in terms of the content. But from what the clips I have seen, it's Onel at his most passionate best, and espousing a view that I think a lot of the Norwich fans feel is the case. Like how could you do that? Whether that's directed at Marcelino Nunez or the football club, how could they look at this and feel that, as Ben Knapper said in those quotes, on the balance of all the factors in play, it was in the best interest of the football club? You can't dispute that at this stage, because the only way you can really definitively say it's in the best interest is let's get to the end of the season, let's see where Norwich are, let's see where Ipswich are, let's see what Marcelino Nunez has done in a blue shirt, and then maybe we can definitively say it was in the best interests or not. But for a season that has started quite patchily in terms of on the pitch, and I know it's early days, and Liam Manning is right to cite a lot of mitigation. This doesn't half put them firmly on the back foot again. And again, you would like to think that has been factored into the equation, that heaven forbid the result doesn't go in their favour at Blackburn. What does that look like in terms of the away end, and then back at base, and then 2 weeks to stew on it, and then it's Wrexham, is it?
Coventry away first.
Coventry away. Okay, yeah, well, they'll win there. Don't worry about that. But then Wrexham's the next one at home, isn't it?
Yes.
So, you don't. If you're Liam Manning, I'm sure you didn't need what this is set in train, which was already, a sense that it's going to take time. You're going to need buy-in from the fans. He's talked about that. Well, are they keeping fans on side with this sort of decision? I don't think so for me. Not in the round. And this is the problem, I think, with this. You need to be more nuanced. It isn't every part of the Norwich fan base are completely aghast. I'm sure there's a sliding scale of emotion, but it feels like the needle at the minute is still firmly in that camp of this didn't need to happen, certainly not to Ipswich. Why have they cashed in? And as a result, because the season hasn't started particularly strongly, this only amplifies maybe the sense of what are they, what is the vision, what is the strategy, what are they trying to do. We know what they're trying to do. They've talked about it liberally, both Liam and Ben Knapper, and the transfer business up to this point inward has suggested that is the case, that they want to compete at the top end of this table. But that's going to get lost in the messaging if Manning in quick order can't get this looking like something that is a cohesive, with and without the ball, robust, and can go up against the Middlesbroughs, which they failed to do, and one or two other teams, maybe coming up, certainly Coventry away, you'd think they'll be in the mix as well. So, and Wrexham, given the cash that they've flashed about most recently for Callum Doyle. So there are games coming up in very short order off the back of Middlesbrough against teams with similar aspirations. If Norwich look as short as they did for me in that second half, certainly against Borough, in these upcoming games, then off the back of this episode, it's really going to be quite a difficult situation, I think, publicly messaging wise, for this club to manage moving forward.
Yes, and of course after Wrexham it's West Brom, Stoke, and then it is that trip to Portman Road against Ipswich Town. So that is the run that they are now going into. And of course, if, as Paddy says, that doesn't go the way they would like and things don't change and there aren't that positive signs, it's going to be very, very difficult to retain that optimism. That being said, if they can turn it around and they can beat Ipswich, then suddenly the feeling is very different, right? And the bragging rights again switch. So that is where it's at. Let's move on from Marcelino Nunez, unless anyone else has any more comments and questions that we'll come to that later on the show. Pella Matson is in the building, and he probably hasn't really had or been spoken about that much. He's someone that clearly, Paddy, they've been chasing all summer. Felt like it was off when they brought in Mirko Topic. It's obviously with the Nunez move been escalated again. He's now a Norwich City player. The hope is that he could feature tomorrow at Blackburn, and clearly he's already played games for Silkeborg this season. So fitness-wise, you wouldn't anticipate that to be an issue. What do you make of that capture? And I guess from the footballing perspective, him being the successor to Marcelino Nunez, although again I respect that you've probably not had a whole host of you've not covered a whole host of minutes of the Danish Super League and Pella Matson in action.
No, he's took the 7, hasn't he? I think
He
took the 7. So there's some good players wore the 7 in Norwich terms, let alone in the game more broadly. So
Stephen Naismith, he was 7, wasn't he?
Well, I said good players. Yeah, I said good players. Always an exception to the rule, Connor. But yeah, I mean, maybe Liam's point there. You do feel a little bit sorry for the lad that he's been pitched into something completely not of his making, and it's worth reiterating he is not, by all accounts, a like for like profile wise. I think I've seen some interesting. I mean, I think Manning himself said at that event last night he's more of a deeper line midfielder, which Nunez was, but always you felt in that area of the pitch he was looking to be very creative and very progressive in his play. I get the sense this guy is a very similar mould to Mirko Topic, and again, not to keep harping back to the broadcast we did earlier in the week, that for me chimes far more with what he had in terms of his central midfield setup at Bristol with Knight and Bird, two very solid operators in that area of the pitch, and maybe the creativity element comes from other areas of the team. So we'll see. Clearly he was one they'd looked at for some time. For me, though, they obviously pivoted to Topic. They couldn't get the deal done earlier in the summer. So, he probably doesn't come in the door if we haven't had this scenario play out with Nunez. So we'll see. It feels almost to me that they've added him, but they had already started to plan without him in that sense. But by all accounts, what he is clearly a player who they feel has that same high ceiling of a Jallo, for example, of a Quistgaard, and that he can come in and you hope, we keep talking about Topic, if he comes in and adapts as quickly as Topic seemingly has, then that relationship could be quite a key blend within what Manning is striving to do. You can see it clearly, the defensive shape, and we don't need to open this up to be formations debate yet again, but the 3 and the wing backs, you can see that shape there. You can see what he's trying to do at the top end of the pitch with the Sargent, the 2 just in behind there. But I think that midfield area for me, because it is so key to control, to dictating the game, to pinning the opposition back, that we haven't seen anywhere near enough in this 4-5 game sample from a Wright Topic, from a Topic McLean, even Nunez when he was dropped in there, albeit we have to make the point that it looked better when Nunez was in that team. So absolutely critical area of this team. I think if you're going to unleash that momentum that Liam Manning keeps saying is just going to come down the line with more work and more understanding, more relationship building. But you do feel to a degree quite sorry for this lad if he gets pitched in and people are expecting him to be a clone of Nunez. That clearly isn't the case. No,
well, I mean, what he might bring is a bit more balance to that middle, and we speak about connections and fluidity, and sometimes that can enable people in other positions to be creative. Last night I thought it was quite telling. Manning he referenced Papa Amadou Diallo a few times in terms of just how much he likes him and how good a player he thinks he is. There's clearly a feeling that there's more to come from him. Antti Sienats, he spoke about him as well and how he needs time to build that relationship with Sargent, because he's asking him to do a lot of different things compared to what he did last year. So if Matson and Topic can build a foundation and maybe be progressive in their passes, then maybe the emphasis won't be on him to be maybe as creative as a Nunez was in moments, which is probably what we're talking about. And maybe that is their thinking here, Paddy, that it's about building a collective that is a lot more balanced, that enables creativity from other areas rather than, again, it being shown in sort of flashes and moments.
Well, that's what he is. I mean, every club that he's left on his coaching journey, and it's still very early in his coaching journey, but he's improved them in terms of the structure of the team, in terms of the understanding of what those players know is required of them individually, collectively, those relationships, those unit relationships in the side. I mean, I go back to, they did the double over Torrops Norwich last season. Both of those games, it was a very pragmatic, almost counter-punching, wait for the mistakes from Norwich or cash in on where they were weak, in terms of, deeper line build-up play and almost inviting pressure on. And, as a problem solver, I think that's my sense now, having, we've dealt with him sufficiently long enough now. He's been in the building long enough. We're starting to see it, that I think he is in his own mind. It's how to decode the problems, to make Norwich, as he says, you can't go from it. And he's talked about it twice this week, actually. The bar he thinks in the quality moments is high, but that low bar in terms of his reference, you need to bring that up and to translate it into maybe ratings. You can't afford to go from 7 and 8 as an individual or as a collective team performance game to game to dropping below 6, which, let's be honest, probably was where Norwich were last season. So he's a very level very measured in his approach, how he talks about his approach. And I think that's why what he's looking for is to lessen the variables here. He doesn't want maybe players who, and this isn't necessarily singling out Nunez, but players who can be up here one week and then down here the next. He wants consistent, and then hopefully you raise that bar of consistency so that it's a consistent 7 every week rather than 4 or 5. So that hasn't happened yet. That probably is unrealistic given the time they've had to bring things together. But in that context of team building and looking for that consistency, maybe a Matson, it plays more within the margins of error as a Topic does in terms of what he is looking for and how he has built his teams at MK, at Oxford, and obviously more recently Bristol, and did that, let's be honest, extracted more. And this was referenced when he was first unveiled. Ben Knapper said his record is getting more out of his available resource, and that comes down to good coaching. So, that clearly is what he will be tasked with and will want himself to deliver at Norwich, to get more out of the available resource he's got.
We speak about creativity. Let's begin to turn our attentions to tomorrow's game and Ewood Park. How did Norwich, and I guess what is the personnel probably is, which is where we're talking about, behind Sargent that they need to solve, because it feels like that is probably the element that they haven't quite. So I'd really like to see that Diallo one side, Chris Corin the other. I think that would be exciting and offer them probably a threat in behind that maybe they haven't had. What's kind of the two that you feel in terms of that those 10 positions, if we're expecting Liam Manning to stick with that dare I say formation?
Yeah, I mean they're the exciting ones, aren't they? They're the two exciting players in terms of that equation. And Liam talked about this pre-Middlesbrough, that area of the pitch, and Cernach, Forson, Marcondes haven't delivered, haven't provided that link support role to Sargent on a consistent basis, haven't really been able to build the play consistently. So he was looking for far more from that area of the pitch. And okay, it was his error that gave Southampton a heads up in midweek. But I thought overall he was quite bright, Fiskard, and then you could see what he offered. And also in his first instinct is penalty box. And I think Sargent particularly would benefit from that, because then all the focus isn't on him in terms of in the box. We just need to mark that man. So, and Jallow has shown a propensity, certainly last Saturday, that he wants to cut in field and he wants to get involved in those pockets of space. So I asked Liam specifically about him pre-Southampton. He said, that is a role he could see him operating in. So how soon? I don't know. Jurasek, I guess, has to come into the equation now. He was playing in those areas as well midweek.
I thought he was good.
I thought he showed quite an intelligent sort of an awareness of, there was a good link up there with Topic where he took it on the half turn and got a shot away, and McCarthy made a good save going to his right full length. But obviously we don't want to put too much onus on him at this stage, but he is one who maybe could emerge into that 10 debate. And obviously Cernach, needs to step up. I don't think anybody would be happy with his level of output so far this season. So there are options, but so much of this at the moment just feels as if, it could come together and the blend could arrive, but we're not seeing enough evidence to say with any real confidence that these should be the players in these positions. And of course, to bring it full circle, you take Jallow out of the wing-back area, then who you slot in there? Because I don't think, with the greatest respect to him, Jeff Slop has really set too much on fire in his early outings, albeit
he's just not up to
he's
speed.
Not up to speed, but still, you'd have expected a little bit more, I think, from him. And you would have an issue there in terms of left wing-back unless Kraseni comes in there and Cordoba retains his place. But so it's the knock-on impact. But yeah, in terms of that top end of the pitch and carrying a bit of more of a threat that is, let's hope Josh Sargent scores today, then on the early evidence, Jallow and Fiskard look far more adaptable and far more probably better suited to playing in and around Sargent and offering Norwich a real edge, which they haven't had bar that man's goals.
It's not a bad shout from Liam. Kenny McLean at left wing back. We've seen that. I guess it would depend on if they have got Matson registered. There's 12 the midday requirements to do that, and I think there was some confidence they could do that. So we'll find out tomorrow when he is or isn't in the. Look, it's a fair point. As I said, we've not watched loads of him. We're just going off basically what Liam Manning said last night. And
what's his goal record?
I can have a look while you're speaking. But I guess to kind of look ahead to the game tomorrow, and maybe to encapsulate all of the elements that we've spoken about at the very start, is there a world in which Liam Manning can use all of what has happened this week? Because I'm sure, the feeling, the shock, the disappointment, all of that has been probably experienced and felt inside the dressing room. I think it's Yeah, I think it's harsh just to cast footballers all in the same way, or that they feel the same way. There will be players in that dressing room who do massively care, who are massively committed, who wouldn't have done what he's done. And I'm not saying just that, but equally the reaction, the pressure, all of that. Could he utilise that heading into tomorrow to create this kind of siege mentality that maybe ultimately will be needed?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you want to play a clever hand, then you probably could, yeah, but I'm not sure to the degree, because ultimately it's Norwich who've sanctioned it. So who's the siege against? Is it against Ben Knapper and the people above them? So, but maybe in terms of I'd broaden that out in terms of, look, it hasn't quite gone any way that we wanted this early part of the season, and there's reasons for that, evidently. But maybe this could be a galvanising factor and bring this group of players closer together, because. And it's the cliche, but every head coach I've ever gone down to Colney to have a chat with always says, "Look, I just want to get this window out of the way, whatever window, winter, summer. Then I know there's a finality to, right, these are the players I'm going to be working with for the next 3 or 4 months. These are the players who want to be here in most instances, because if they didn't, they'd probably have sorted themselves out by the end of that window." So I think he's probably edging towards more, right, you lads want to be in the building. And okay, there's scenarios around Sargent that and some of the fringe players, but Sargent principally, that, could have ended differently if maybe the interest had been there of a firm nature on a Wolfsburg level, which wasn't the case outside of the Wolfsburg interest. But that said, nobody could question that man's attitude and that man's willingness to be part of it and play a full part of it and be the leader and set the example, which he has done magnificently early part of this season. So for me, that factor, rather than, because ultimately that's something that Norwich as a club have been complicit in allowing to happen. So it's less about maybe the Nunez thing per se, but I just think you could circle the wagons around, right, you are the lads now, we're going to go on this journey together, and this will be a good starting point now off the back of 2 very disappointing home results.
Yeah, I almost think it would be like, look, those fans out there have spoken a lot about commitment this week. I'm giving his team talk for him, but go and show them how you think and feel.
I wouldn't say that's not a huge amount of goal contributions from Matson, is it? That's
you can be
16 and 149.
You can be creative about having a load of goal contributions, can't you?
But I don't think he's going to be winning too many match balls with those numbers, is he? But whether I take your point in terms of your passing range, because obviously Nunez, to be brutally honest, somebody flashed him up earlier today on social. Nunez's bottom line numbers were not particularly stand out, were they? But you saw enough quality in terms of set pieces and deliveries that you maybe always had that slight misconception about his actual output. But the reality is, I don't think his numbers were particularly anything to write home about.
No, completely agree. And I think there was a stat that said Kenny McLean had got more goal contributions than him in the last however many years. But I think in many ways, and I don't want to go back over it, but the sort of feeling around Nunez is that ability to create moments that he was able to do, maybe rather than those consistent performances. But let's move it away from him, because we don't want to spend much longer speaking about a player ultimately now who is playing for Ipswich Town. The game tomorrow, then, Pad, they are facing a team who under Valishmal, I think they've had a pretty turbulent summer, but come into this game off the back of a 3-0 win at Hull. Todd Cantwell is now their club captain. It's a really interesting game for where Norwich City. Absolutely, yeah. This does feel to an extent, he wasn't that good anyway, but I get it. It's fine. It's an interesting game without all of the overhang of narrative that there is this week, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, as I say, if none of this, if we'd have completely had a very quiet week and nothing had happened in terms of transfer window, and certainly nothing had happened of this scale with their arch rivals, this is a big game, because, to paraphrase what we just discussed in the last section, that it has felt a bit of a one step forward and one back, and even within games that's been the case, and that's not a trend that's going to nudge Norwich forward on the road that they have told us now that they're aiming to go this season. So just purely in terms of that, tomorrow feels a big game, and I'm leaning in a bit to they tend to do reasonably okay there at Ewood Park, which is no measure at all, historical references, but they normally get a result there, and I think if they were to get a result, it Pride of Anglia, Marcelino Nunez. Right, we don't. That's an Nunez. Sorry, we've gone off on a tangent now, Connie. You should be showing me things on social media. Is that in Ipswich or is that a Mockle?
That's in Ipswich, I believe. Yeah.
So we've got one of those electronic boards that you see in town centres.
Let me see if I can show that. There,
so that's not a Photoshop job, no.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, there you go then. Always a blue like Wayne Rooney. But so I think just purely in the context of a patchy start to this season, this is big, because result-wise, yes, but also performance-wise, you need to start ticking it beyond. Well, we've had 20, 25 minutes of control, and then we shoot ourselves in the foot metaphorically, which is which has characterised these last two games. Portsmouth away, Watford away, that's something to lean into as well. The last two away days, they've shown that resolve when they needed to, but also they've had that cutting edge. Pompey obviously set piece wise, and then Watford, Jallo lit that game up. So, yeah, it wouldn't half help the mood, I think, Connor, if they came back from Ewood with a result. And then at least you've got a little bit of respite over the fortnight to come to maybe settle things down, and then, hopefully, obviously, in terms of the training block that affords Liam Manning, minus his internationals, of course, but and also, again, without labouring the point, Monday 7 p.m. transfer window shut domestically, around most of Europe, and you know where you stand then until January. And if you're Liam Manning, I'm sure he can't wait.
Yeah, he spoke about this last night. Said he couldn't wait.
Yeah.
I think he might have even gone as strong as I hate the transfer window in terms of everything that it brings.
He hates it.
I don't know if he said those words. I'm probably paraphrasing, but that's what he implied. And I think again, it's this kind of feeling that you can have a really settled player and squad, and then suddenly something happens and it all changes for the worse, and that's not what you want as a coach. So that will help. I mean, on that front, Paddy, do you feel that's Norwich done now with Pella, Matson? That certainly seems to be the noises that we were getting. But
well, I think this week, if nothing else tells us, we won't definitively say anything is done in or out, my man. But that's the soundings. Yeah, that now they've done a midfield shuffle. Then Sargent's not going anywhere supposedly. So if that is the case, then I think it'll be round the margins. It'll be Slimani, it'll be Duffy, maybe some of the younger players in terms of loan opportunities. And other than that, yeah, it's as you were, and that'll be interesting in itself once the window. I mean, we're in the white hot heat of Nunez gate now, but when the window does close, and we'll all assume that Sargent's in the building, what will be the more general reflections on the window as a whole, both in terms of the really epic levels of, in terms of volume of players, inward business. And then, of course, going the other way, that, the likes of Borja, Science, and now Marcelino Nunez. So, I did see the point made, and that was the narrative towards the back end of last season. Those were your three crown jewels to give it that, Sargent, Nunez, Science. Not given his destination, I accept, in terms of Nunez, but if the window closed and Sargent of the three is still in the building, I think most Norwich fans would have signed for that. But obviously that completely disregards the context of where a certain individual has ended up. But if that's what comes to pass, it will be interesting if people can get past this Nunez element, and how they would maybe in the round assess Norwich's business. Because there's no doubt there has been a huge turn of the wheel. And as Ben Knapper said at the very outset of the summer, it needed to happen because it was so stale and it was so lacking in what he felt he was trying to build here. And so they had to do something about it. And they did that, fair play. They're on the front foot. Too early to definitively say in every case they've made a good piece of business there, because it will take time. I'm sure there's one or two who've already pushed themselves forward. Harry Darling, notably.
It's been excellent.
Yeah, but there's maybe one or two others who look like they're still a work in progress, and that will continue. But so maybe we'll get Monday night out of the way, and then just see how people actually, when the dust settles, what they make of Norwich's transfer window.
Yeah, I suspect the majority of it will come down to how, or the levels of progress that they make. Just very quickly, I mean, on Blackburn, what do you make of Todd Cantwell and the captaincy? Because I think it, certainly speaking to our Blackburn counterpart, it seems to have got the best out of him. And it's not the first time we've seen this creative player who's maybe, a little bit, I'm trying to think of the right word, who is a little bit out of the box and has maybe a perception. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but maybe has a perception of being a little bit difficult. You give them the captaincy, and sometimes that can unleash them, and it can give them a new sense of responsibility. So I don't think it's maybe as mad as it looks from the outside. And certainly I think his performances starting this season seem to suggest it's been an inspired call so far by Valérien Ismaël.
Well, I mean, you might know this off the top of your head, can't you? I was just trying to work out how old he is now. Is he 27? I'm going to say 26.
27?
Is he 27?
28 maybe?
Yeah. So, I mean, you forget because he came through relatively early, didn't he? But 27, yeah, 27. Todd Cantwell. There you go. So
that's my useless brain.
Yeah. But and I think he's got a little family now as well, hasn't he? As well. So I know from personal experience that calms you down a bit as well. So that maturity as a person, as a player. I mean, he was always, setting aside, the elements that have come with him in his Norwich journey. When you ever spoke to him, he was always somebody who came across as quite, cerebral, quite intelligent, thought about things. Yeah, not only in a footballing context as well. If you ever, was sort of following him on his social media account, he's aware of the issues beyond the narrow confines of football. So all of those elements with it, as I say, getting older, he's had some difficult footballing experiences now. So if he feels he's in a comfortable environment in terms of Blackburn and he feels wanted, that always felt like a big thing with Todd. That he felt he was wanted and valued, maybe whether it was head coaches, fan base, wider staff within football clubs. If you've got that, then maybe that's how you get the best out of him. And then obviously on top of that, you give him the captain's armband, then it could well turn out to be inspired. But with the caveat that, Cantwell's journey would suggest that, you wouldn't nail your colours to the mast. It's going to work as an experiment. But so far, he seems to be certainly contributing in terms of his own individual numbers and their results. A little bit patchy, but they did have a good win at Hull, wasn't it, last time out? So and you can guarantee he will not lack. I mean, you talked earlier there about Norwich players and motivation. There's a player who won't lack for motivation at Ewood tomorrow, and he would dearly love to, I'm sure, be a key figure in a home win as the captain against his old club.
Just to round it off, then of course people can send in their predictions. We'll save ours until the team news video tomorrow. So I'm not going to push you for a prediction pad, but just in terms of maybe how it needs to go from a Norwich City perspective, it needs to be kind of a change of the narrative, doesn't it? Certainly feels like that heading up to the north, as we're going to do in very shortly.
Well, exactly that. What it cannot be is what it has been these last two games, particularly. But elements of that I think have been demonstrated in all the games in the Manning so far, which is, yes, some positive phases, but nowhere near good at all. And it was a bit concerning for me. And I know there was a lot of changes midweek, and then there was even more changes in terms of the lineup. But
do you agree with this? With Finlay must win?
No, I don't. In what context?
What happens if they don't win? That's what I always say about the
yeah. I mean, Finlay wants to come back there in terms of what the mood of the fan base, keeping everybody sort of from going off the deep end even more than they already have. I don't know. Not in terms of the league and where we're at the moment. Absolutely not. But what I was saying there was, it feels that it needs to be something different. It needs to be, if it is periods of control, that they take their chances. And then if they take their chances, that we don't get any of the silly turnover errors that have pockmarked the last two games for me. So, yeah, what I'm looking for, irrespective of the result, is a step forward because that needs to start moving in that direction pretty swiftly for me, because that's got to be that cannot be a Norwich fan predicting a 3-0 home win, surely. But yeah, Jonathan there saying PR-wise, a win is a must. Yeah, maybe you could see that, but
it's going to be a long 2 weeks if not, isn't it?
Oh, it will be, absolutely. But particularly if the result is the result, and there's other factors that can be in your control, out of your control, that affect the result. But if the performance is no better than what we saw against Southampton and what we saw earlier in the week against Middlesbrough, then that won't go down well. And that was my point I was going to make, that I didn't like Manning talking up that he didn't like the intensity and he didn't like kind of some of the signals and the body language he got in the second half. That, to me, is a bit troubling. So certainly don't want to see anything of that nature tomorrow when he restores what he feels are his best 11.
This is a nice place to leave it. Craig going 4-0 in Norwich's favour. That would certainly be good. It certainly feels like after this week, it's one of those where it wouldn't surprise you if Norwich went and got a major result. But I'm not gonna put too much on that. We'll see what we get. That seems like a nice place to wrap things up. We've been going about 45 minutes or so and covered, I think, all of the key topics. And of course, as I said, we will be live across our channels, Facebook, YouTube and X, at 2:15. I'm still refiguring my brain to the team news stuff, but we'll be there obviously to bring you that team news live from Ewood Park tomorrow. If you follow us on Instagram, which you can do, we will be live on there in the morning as well to do kind of a little preview chat as well. So come and join us on there. We'll probably be, what time do you reckon? I'm trying to piece this together in my head. It's hard to say, but usually about 10, 11-ish.
Yeah, maybe a little bit earlier. Yeah,
maybe a bit earlier.
Although it's a 3:00 kickoff, isn't it? Yeah.
I keep thinking to myself, it's a lunchtime kickoff. To be honest, it's definitely not a lunchtime kickoff. No.
Yeah. Probably a bit late morning. Then we'll have a stroll.
Yes,
around the Lancashire Hills.
Absolutely. So come and join us over there. If you put the Pinkin into Instagram, I'm sure you'll find us. I think it's the _Pinkin on there, so a little bit different. We will see you all there. And of course, if you're making the trip up to Blackburn, we salute you, and we will see you up there as well. Hopefully your efforts and your travel are rewarded with, I think, what we all need after this week, 3 points. Thanks for watching. See you soon.